From ActionAid Bangladesh, this is Rukhsar Sultana. To everyone joining with us today with Zoom, Facebook, and as well as YouTube Live, it is my pleasure to welcome you all to the second day of the 7th International Water Conference. Earlier today, we had our thematic session 2 on the structural interventions and regional geopolitics around the Teesta River Basin. The discussion was quite vivid and stimulating, and we learned a lot on geopolitics, water justice, and our need for a joint management of river basin. With that said, the session that we are attending now is on Teesta River Basin, ecosystem and gender implications. Along this line, we have a paper presentation by Ms. Zareen Yasmin Choiti. We also have a screening of a video documentary courtesy of Ms. Minket Lepcha. We also have a panel of powerful speakers and grassroots representatives joining us in this session. This session will be chaired and moderated by Ms. Farah Kabir, the Country Director of ActionAid Bangladesh. Ms. Kabir is a prominent figure and spokesperson for women empowerment and has extensive experience and knowledge in the field of water governance and gender issues. We are extremely thrilled by her presence in this very important session. Before I hand over the session to Ms. Farah Kabir, I would like to go over a few housekeeping announcements. So the microphone and audio options in the Zoom has been disabled for the participants. So please use the chat box to raise any questions you have towards the panel. Also, we have a Q&A session at the end of this session, so after the discussion. So please, we will try to address all those questions there. We also would request the participants to raise their hand during Q&A session so that we can open the floor for them to directly ask the questions to this panel. We will be taking a group photo at the end of the session, and we will request you to turn on your cameras there. As mentioned earlier, this session is being recorded and it is live streamed in ActionAid Bangladesh YouTube and Facebook channels. So feel free to cross-post the links. Lastly, we are proud to announce that we are promoting a bilingual dialect. Though it's an international conference, we are promoting it to be bilingual, and we have representatives from different communities in Lalmonirhat and Kolapara, a few of the working areas of ActionAid Bangladesh, and we are providing them with live translation of all the discussion that is happening here in English in a separate channel, but they are all watching this directly with us. With that said, I would like to welcome and give floor to Ms. Farah Kabir to share her opening remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruksa. A very warm welcome this Friday afternoon to all of you who are joining this session. This is the third thematic session of the 7th International Water Conference, and it focuses on Teesta River Basin. We're looking at overcoming the challenges. So there is a premise that there are challenges. And this session is going to be looking at whether the policies or actions are gendered and inclusive. Now, the Teesta River flows across northwest Bangladesh through Rangpur division. And by an estimate, about 21 million Bangladeshis, half of whom are women, live in the basin of the river Tista. Local livelihoods in the Tista Basin are based primarily on natural resources such as agriculture and fishery. Now, in the present times, because of its geographic location, flash floods, riverine floods, riverbank erosion, and other extreme climatic events, climate change, it has destroyed the farmland and reduced people's livelihood options. The area also has a range of socioeconomic problems, including poverty, inequality, and unemployment and child marriage. It was much sharper in previous decades, but it's improving. However, they remain there. These factors impact heavily on the poor and the marginalized communities in the lower reaches of the Tista. Now, this session looking at gender inclusion I want to state here that women are said to experience differentiated citizenship in general, and they often suffer gender-based discrimination, which is exacerbated due to climate change, the vagaries of weather and extreme weather conditions, river management, and access to and affordability of water. We know that flood increases women's work burden and makes them physically and mentally more vulnerable than men, because men tend to leave the villages in search of alternative sources of livelihood and income. Now, there's also a perception that women in the rural areas suffer on a greater scale these uncertainties. The gendered roles, social norms, poor access to resources, these issues further challenge women. Women are vulnerable to economic and social disposition in the process of the displacement of rural populations due to changes in the river, its flow, its management, governance, including the negotiations and outcomes of transboundary water sharing. Now, it's not just the humans, but it's also the biodiversity, the ecosystem, which are equally getting impacted and hampered. In the inaugural session, we saw there was a video presentation that people were losing their livelihood, different species of fish, agriculture was suffering, and the river-centering art culture was also on the verge of extinction. Amid the discussions this morning, we heard a lot about structural interventions and whether Tista is a geopolitical issue or not. We often, while having these discussions, tend to forget how these interventions are impacting the people whose lives are dependent on the river. Now, the construction of a large dam may be an engineering solution, but it has a social implication along with the economic implication, and it impacts the indigenous rights of the river. With these few words, I am hoping to open this session, and it's going to be very exciting. We have a keynote presentation from Zareen Yasmin Choiti. She's an assistant professor at Gender and Development Studies, Begum Rokeya University. And Choiti will be talking about living with the Tista River, women's livelihood strategies in the changing climate of the Tista River Basin. So it's my pleasure, Choiti, to welcome you, and we look forward to listening to your presentation.
Thank you so much, Farah Kubirapa. I'm sharing a presentation. I hope everyone can see my presentation right now.
Yes, okay. Please continue.
Okay, thank you so much for inviting me, and I am pleased to be here and share my presentation with you. I am Zareen Yasmin Choiti, as you mentioned that I'm assistant professor at Begum Rokeya University. At the same time, I'm an alumnus of the Australian National University. This research actually was a part of my master's thesis at that university, so I extended that work right now. So my focus was living with the Tista River, how women are actually changing their livelihood strategies in the time of climate change, and at the same time while they are living at the Tista River Basin. So as you mentioned that since yesterday, we have discussed a lot about the geopolitics and the technical issues of the Tista River. So I'm just skipping this part. So, but I want to mention 2 or 3 most important things, that it is the 4th largest river in Bangladesh and covers 14% of the arable land. And around 21 million people are dependent on this river. And we know half of them are women. So it's a huge population who are actually dependent on the Tista River Basin for their lives and livelihoods. So this is also some kind of technical slide. So it is a transboundary river, and lots of human interventions like dams, hydropower project at the Sikkim and West Bengal. At the same time, 2 barrages we have built at the Gajaldova in India and also in the Dalia Tista barrage. So these human interventions actually are changing the ecology of the Tista River Basin, which we are seeing in adverse side. So another new project that was declared last year, funded by the China, that 1 billion project, it is actually have ignited the flame and the debate and conflict about the transboundary Tista River issue. So that's why it is we are facing a lots of problems right now. So the context we shared that due to upstream dams and barrages, along with the climate change stressors, are reducing water flow in the Tista River Basin, and at the same time changing the ecology. So that's actually changing women's lives and livelihood strategy. What we have seen in the past are now diminishing gradually, and women and people of that river basin actually trying to adapt with new strategies that we are going to look at the next within the next few slides. So as Farah Appa also mentioned that how women experience the climate change and the changes in the river basin actually is different than how men are actually facing that changes because of their gender roles, responsibilities, gender dynamics, intra-household gender relationships. Lots of factors actually influence women's experience. So my objective of this research is to critically analyze how the changes in the Tista River Basin are influencing women's lives and livelihoods, at the same time focus on women's survival strategy to adapt with the ongoing changes in the Tista River Basin. So as a theoretical framework, I actually use the feminist political ecology because we know that when we are talking about the transboundary river, we cannot ignore the political perspective, at the same time the ecological changes. So I try to look at this situation through the lens of feminist political ecology and try to gather the information with the narratives of women, from women, and how they are making their livelihoods, at the same time their relationships with the river, from their survival strategies, loss and flourishment, etc. So about the livelihood in the Tista Basin, we found that most of the people actually are related with the agriculture. So agriculture is the main livelihood in the Tista River Basin areas. Both men and women actually are involved in agricultural sectors. Most of inhabitants are working as a day labor, and sometimes they also work as rickshaw pullers, as a small business person, or sometimes they migrate to other cities and work as a garment sector. But the number are very few. Maximum people are actually involved with the agricultural sectors and they're doing farming. What we have also seen that people actually are changing their livelihoods because of the changes with the climate change and the situation. Like we have found some livelihoods options actually are diminishing, like boatmen and fishermen. People actually are leaving these livelihoods because the river water is reducing. So people actually not using the boat for as a transport as they used to be in the past. And also due to reduced number of fish and the water resources, the fishermen are also living their livelihoods in this Tista River Basin. And that's why seasonal migration by men and women is increasing. It has been well established as a livelihood strategy right now, because when river erosion occur, or they lose their house, or any disaster strike their life, then they adopt the seasonal migration as an immediate livelihood strategy to survive. So these changes we are seeing in the Tista River Basin right now. So if we want to focus on the women's livelihood, we have compared with past and present livelihood strategies. So through our research, we have found that at past, women were not actually working outside. So one of my respondents said, Robi Sheikh, that women started working outside after the liberation of Bangladesh in 1971. And now it's very common for the poor women to work along with the men in the field or in the agricultural sectors. And Aisha Bano, who is an elderly person, she also said that we used to stay at home and did household chores, made different handmade products like nokshikatha, mat, basket, box from the hogla leaves, which are actually not very common right now because women are changing their livelihood strategies. But these were actually very common in past. and women are considered as honor of the family. That's why they were actually not allowed to work outside in previous time. So we also found that sense existing till now, but that perception of women and men are changing, so that we will also look at the next slide. And we also found that cultural and religious social stigma about women's work actually are restricting them to being engaged with the income activities in the past time. But what we see right now, that women are overcoming this situation and being involved with the different kinds of livelihood strategies. As I mentioned, that women are being involved with the agricultural sectors. So in these three pictures, you can see that women are actually doing cattle raising. They are working in the paddy field. And also here, my two respondents, Nazma and Saleha Begum, they actually taken Kamla Kishan, that we say in the local language. They are actually agricultural day labor. They have adopted that livelihood strategy for their survival and to support their family. But during my research time, they were jobless because of the recent flood at the Tista River. As we know that there are lots of flash floods are ongoing every year in the Tista River Basin. But along this part, women are actually being more involved with the agricultural sector and also cattle rearing. That we have changed, we have seen the changes from the past times, because in the past women were not being able to involve with the income generating activities. It was considered as the disgrace for the family. But right now we can see, due to the extreme poverty, resource loss, or changing the social context, awareness raising, and also increased labor demand due to male migration, women are being involved with the livelihood or income generating activities, whatever available in the Tista River Basin areas. So Rina Begum, a female respondent, shared, now women do more work than the past and earning money. They are living with the poverty. Therefore, they have to work in household as well as in the field. So we also see that women are being involved with the income generating activities, and that also increased their some kind of workload or work burden at the same time. But what we found that there is extreme wage discrimination in that area. As I mentioned, due to gender roles, responsibilities, and gender dynamics of that particular area, women are getting almost half of the wage than men get. Like we found that men's wage is $5 per day. That is around 4 or 450 taka in Bangladeshi taka. But women get 150 to 200 taka, that is $2.5 per day for their wage. Though we found that they are working more or less same kind of work, but there is prevailing existing wage discrimination. Interestingly, we found that different perceptions between men and women regarding wage discrimination. From the male's perspective, men think that women can't do some sort of heavy work like lifting the paddy plants in their head, or they cannot carry a huge burden, so they cannot move the agricultural products or harvesting. So that's why they get less amount of money. But when we asked the same question to the female respondent, they shared that no, though we do equal work and hours in the field, we also do some sort of heavy lifting, but women and men, men's value is more our society. So they are getting half of the wage of the male counterpart. So we found that their wage discrimination, it is not about their actually the physical work, but actually because of the perception about women, because they are weak and they cannot do some sorts of work. So apart from the livelihood strategy, I also want to mention about the women's transformation, because how they transformed their livelihood, or how they shifted from the sufferer to a savior of the family. Because we found that they are being involved with the activities, income generating activities, earning money and contributing to their family. So they are actually not only the victim of the situation, because from the previous literature review, we saw that women were portrayed as the victim of the disaster situation or merely the climate change situation and the disaster situation. But recent studies actually trying to focus on more on women's positive side, as we see that they are facing some sorts of challenges, difficulties, but they are not leaving that place. So why they are not leaving this place and why they are staying there and how they are staying there. So to focus on that particular perspective, I tried to focus that how they became the survivor and also savior of the family. So we found that women are not only vulnerable or submissive, rather they became the savior. How? They have adapted and developed life skills and capacity like swimming, riding boat or banana raft or during the flood. These are some sort of life skill development they have adapted living through the Tista River Basin. Because when I asked them, they said that we all women know how to swim, how to ride boat, or how to ride a banana raft, because every year we face flood. So to take care of our family and protect our family during the flood time, we have gradually adapted this kind of skills in our life. They also learn store food, make savings, and take care of the family during flash flood, because through the different kinds of trainings, awareness raising programs in the media, through the NGOs and governments. So they have adapted these sorts of strategies to survive with the situation. One of my respondents, Janarbi Begum, mentioned that they are changing attitude. Like every time we lose our house, we make new one. We do every kind of work a man do to reconstruct our house, like soil digging, transferring the materials, uplifting the homestead, make new clay oven. So these sorts of things they have adapted in their life, they have included in their capacity building skills so that they can survive the situation. Rina Begum also said that many women from our village cultivate onion, garlic, etc. at their homestead garden, as well as in the farm for household uses and also to sell in the market. So this is another kind of strategy they have adapted to support their family with the food and also make some money by selling these products at the market. So women are being involved in income generating activities and earning money and saving money for their for saving their family, for being the survivor of the family. Here we can see the two pictures. One is collected from the internet. We can see that women is cooking on the banana raft during the flood time. So they have adapted that skills to cook in that difficult period to feed their family members. And at the right side, we can see a special kind of oven that we call chula, that is made of concrete, because during the flood time, if they usually use the clay-made oven, which get melted in the water, but they have invented that kind of concrete made oven which will not get melted in the flood time. So they keep it in a special place in their house. Whenever any kind of flood happens, they use that particular oven to cook food for their family members. And it is very common in those Tista River Basin areas. If you go to the market, you will find that kind of oven in that particular area, because they usually use that during the disaster time. So these kinds of things they have adapted. And these three pictures are showing the different scenario of women. Like women is uplifting a heavy burden on her head. In the middle picture, women is actually working during the rainy season and transferring agricultural harvest in their home. And at the right side, you can see women and men are actually working in a potato field. So they are working together. This is kind of changing situation in the Tista River Basin, what we have seen. We also found that several NGOs and government initiatives have taken in that particular area that is actually catalyzing their change situation. So we found women grow and work in the potato, chili, nuts, watermelon, corn, etc. in those fields for their livings. They have introduced different kinds of crops like nuts, watermelon, and corns, which are actually climate adaptive and give more yield during this high temperature or in the flood situation. So we found Oxfam, CLP, that is Store Livelihood Projects, Practical Actions, and some other NGOs who are working at that particular areas, mostly in my field areas. So they are working on the women's capacity building, training, improved technology. Like I said, they introduced sandbar cropping, that is another kind of cropping system, and also provide some kinds of seeds that are adaptive with the chore environment or the chore climate, which will give the more yield during this adverse climatic situation. So these kinds of things are happening in chore areas and Tista River Basin areas. So these things actually reducing child marriage, their poverty, vulnerable situation of women in the Tista River Basin. So in conclusion, we can say that Tista is a very crucial river for people of northern people, not only the northern people, but for all of the peoples directly or indirectly. And women share a strong and significant bonding with the river that we have seen from the past and present time. And they are actually adapted different and alternative livelihood strategies, new cropping systems, and developing disaster preparedness to adapt with the situation and also uplift their living standards. So if you say one takeaway from my research or my presentation, that is women not merely the victim, rather women are survivor and savior of the family. So during the climate change and disaster context, so we should focus on that ray of hope that women can do and bring positive changes. And they are not merely the victim, they are survivor and they are strong and bold. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Choiti, and thank you for ending on a positive note that women's agency and how women are coping, and also they are contributing to the family and the society. Now, may I request our discussant to bear with me and allow a little bit of change, because I was thinking that, you know, Ajay has such a huge experience of river and working in South Asia, and you know, he was part of the Water Manifesto. He's written so much that I'll bring Ajay in a minute, a little later, and invite Miniket from Lepcha, because she will be talking about Sikkim. Is that all right with you, Ajay? And also I would like to invite Sharmin Nilormi later. So if we listen to our friend from Sikkim and also watch the movie, then we get a perspective of the gendered dimensions and factors, right? Is that all right, Ajay? Okay. I don't see Nilormi. I hope it's okay with you, Nilormi.
Absolutely, Appa.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So
Yeah.
then we will move to Miniket Lepcha. Miniket has a movie that she's a storyteller, she's a filmmaker, she's also an independent researcher, and she's made a movie. So we will see that and then we will invite her to speak. Miniket, are you with us?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. So would you like to show your film and then talk about it, and then we'll come to our special, you know, all our guests and discussants. Is you okay with that?
Yeah,
All
I'm
right.
perfectly fine. Thank you.
Wonderful. So let's watch your movie. My team.
Yes, thank you, Faraba. So from our end, we'll be streaming the movie. Dear participants, we will now be screening a
Teesta River is the fourth major transboundary river in Bangladesh.
The river originates from the Lake Kalamu located in the north of the Indian state Sikkim, flows through 3 states in 2 countries and finally merges with Brahmaputra River in Bangladesh. The basin is prone to landslides, floods and erosion. 21 million people in Bangladesh depend on the Tista River for their livelihood and other economic activities. Tista River, shared between India and Bangladesh, is home to about 30 million people.
আমার বাপ চাচারা চলছে গৃহস্থির কাজ করছে আমরা ছোট ছোট ছিলাম নদী অনেক দূরে ছিল তিস্তা নদী হয়তো দাগে মাঠে যে ফসলগুলো হয়েছে আমরা ভালোই চলতাম নদীতে বাড়ি ঘর আমাদের ভাঙা যায় তখন আমাদের আর যাওয়ার জায়গা নাই জমি যখন নদী চলে গেল তখন আইসা আমরা এই বাঁধে সরকারি বাঁধ একরের জায়গার মধ্যে আমরা বাড়ি করে আসি যখন জমি ভাঙা গেল ভাঙা যাওয়ার পর আমার এই পেশা হলো মাছ ধরা
আবার সুবেদ মেলা কিছু আছে 6 মাসে মনে করে আলু গম কালাই ভুট্টে মেলা কিছু আবাদ হয় এখন নদী ভাঙনের পর কোনো আবাদ নাই আর আগত মনে করো 20-22 হাত ঘর আছিল গোল ভরা গরু আছিল খান ধান বের ভরা ধান আছিল এখন তো কিছুই নাই এলা নিত করি নিত খাওয়া
আর এই চরাঞ্চলে এত ফসল হইতো ধান পাট মরিচ তামাক আলু ভুট্টা তারপরে আপনার বাদাম এগুলো অনেক হইতো আর কি এখন সেটা বন্ধ হয়েছে নদী ভাঙার পরে এটা বন্ধ হয়েছে
Both countries have built irrigation projects along the river. In the dry season, the river in Bangladesh remains completely dry, but the monsoon releases of dams exacerbate flood impacts. Every year, thousands of people, especially fishermen and farmers, routinely lose their homes and livelihoods to flash floods and starve during droughts. These problems are being intensified by changing climatic patterns.
এই বর্ষার মাছটা মাছ ধরি মাছ ধরার পর বর্ষার পরে যখন পানি শুকায় যায় শুকায় গেলে তো তখন মাছও থাকে না পানিও কমে যায়
আগে আমি বিভিন্ন প্রজাতির মাছ ধরতাম যেমন বোয়াল মাছ আইর মাছ বাগার মাছ ট্যাংরা মাছ বিভিন্ন ধরনের মাছ ধরতাম বৈরতি মাছ ইদানিং মাছ নাই তত মাছ নাই মাছ শুধু বৈরতি মাছ পাওয়া যায় আর 2-1টা হঠাৎ মোটা বালিয়া মাছ পাওয়া যায় আমরা বেশ কয়েকজন মাছ মারছিলাম তার মধ্যে দেখা যাচ্ছে কেউ ঢাকা গেছে মাছ যেহেতু নাই কেউ ঢাকা গেছে কেউ দিন মজুরি করে বিভিন্ন জনে বিভিন্ন পেশায় গেছে আমারও সিদ্ধান্ত আছে দেখি মাছ না হলে তো সংসার চালাতে পারি না তাহলে আমাকে যে কোনো একটা পথ খুঁজে বের করতে হবে
যখন থাকি স্বামীর বাড়িতে আছি তখন থাকি বন্যা মনে করো ছোট খাতা গ্রামে খালি বন্যা প্রথম যখন বন্যা ছিল তখন ঘরে বাড়ি উঠছিল আর এখন দিন দিন বন্যা হয় ঘরের চকি তলে যায় ফির আবার বন্যা হয় আবার হানে মনে করো চাল তলে যাচ্ছে
এই যে এখানে যে দাঁড়ায় আছি এটাও একটা নদী এটাও নদী আমার নৌকাটা শুকনায় পড়ে আছে ওটাও নদীর মধ্যেই আছে আমরা বাড়ি করছি এখানে অনেক এই নালাটা অনেক গভীর ছিল উজানে ভাত ভাঙিয়া এই নালাগুলো ভর্তি হয়ে গেছে এখন নৌকা আর সরাসরি অন্য মাসে নিয়ে যাইতে পারি না একদিকে ব্রিজের গেট আটকা রাখে উজান থেকে আবার ভারত থেকে পানি আসে উজানের পানিও ক্ষতি করে বর্ষা মাসে ব্যারেজের গেট আটকা রাখে ওই গেটের সাহায্যে আমাদের অনেক ক্ষতি হয়ে যায়
আমরা এই মানুষের বাড়িতে কাজ করি এখন তো আমার 3 বার বাড়ি ভাঙাতে এখন আমরা যে থাকবো কোথায় আমার সেই বাড়ি নেই জমি নেই
এই বন্যা এলাকায় যত নারী আছে আমার মনে করো কষ্টতে জীবনটা কষ্ট করে যাইছি মনে করো বাইরের থেকে 10 টাকা টানিয়ে আনি পাই না বাচ্চা কাচ্চা লেখাপড়া করাইতে কষ্ট নিজে চলাফেরা করা কষ্ট নিজে একটা কোনো জিনিসও নিয়ে আনন্দ ফুর্তি করে গেলে তো কষ্ট টাকা পয়সা না হলে তো কষ্টই থাকবো
Tista River remains one of the biggest water disputes between India and Bangladesh since the finalization of the Ganga Water Treaty in 1996.
আসলে যেখানে সমস্যাটা সেটা হলো তিস্তা যেখান থেকে প্রবাহিত হচ্ছে সেটা সিকিম থেকে আসছে এবং মমতা ব্যানার্জির যেই যুক্তিটা তার মধ্যে কিছুটা আমি মনে করি যে একটা বিষয় আছে যেটা মেনে নেওয়া কঠিন হলেও সত্য সেটা হলো সিকিম কতখানি পানি পশ্চিমবঙ্গকে দিচ্ছে সেটা কিন্তু আমরা হিসাবে বা দিল্লি হিসাবে রাখতে চাচ্ছে না আসলেই পশ্চিমবঙ্গে যখন পানিটা আসে বিশেষ করে শীতের মৌসুমে তখন পানিটা কিন্তু আসলেই থাকে না এবং যেই পানিটা একেবারেই থাকে না সেই পানিটা পশ্চিমবঙ্গে কিভাবে শেয়ার করবে এখন বছরের পর বছর বাংলাদেশ এই রাজনীতির মধ্যে চলে এসেছে আমরা বছরের পর বছর এটা না করার ফলে আমরা মনে করলাম যে আমাদের নিজেদের একটা সমাধান করা প্রয়োজন এবং আমাদের যারা এই নিয়ে কাজ করেন তারা একটা সমাধান দেখালেন সেটা হলো বিশেষ করে বৃষ্টির মৌসুমে যেহেতু প্রচুর পানি চলে আসে সেই পানিটা যদি আমরা রাখতে পারি, স্টোরেজ করতে পারি, তাহলে একটা সমাধান হতে পারে। এবং সেখান থেকে জিওপলিটিক্সের একটা নতুন মাত্রা আমরা দেখতে পেলাম।
Not just the flow of river water and associated livelihood has altered, the changing river dynamics has also resulted in loss of river-centric cultures.
আগের যুগে অনেক কিছুই হইতো, অনেক স্মৃতি এখন পাল্টে গেছে, দেশের বা এলাকার পরিবর্তন হয়ে গেছে। যেমন এই যে আমরা এই যে নদীতে দাঁড়ায় আছি, এটার মধ্যে পানি ছিল, নৌকাবাজ খেলা হইতো। আমোদ উৎসাহটা অন্যরকম একটা আনন্দ আমরা উপভোগ করতাম। যেমন চৈত্র মাসে জমিতে আউশ ধান ছিল, মানুষে কান্দিত যে বৃষ্টি হয় না, খরা। ওই ছোট ছোট পোলাপান নিয়ে আমরা নাচা পিছা গায়ে কাদা মাইকা ওই বাড়ি বাড়ি যায় চাউল উঠাইতাম, গান গাইতাম, আল্লাহ মেঘ দে, বৃষ্টি দে, ছায়া দে রে তুই, এরকম একটা গান গাইতাম, গৈর পারতাম কাদা মাটির মধ্যে। এই জিনিসগুলো আসলে এখন নাই।
অ্যাকশন এইড বাংলাদেশ পানির সম্পদের গুরুত্ব, পানির ন্যায্যতা এবং নদীর অধিকার নিয়ে বেশ কিছুদিন ধরে কাজ করে যাচ্ছে। পানি নিয়ে যে বিভিন্ন উদ্ভাবনী চিন্তা, এর বিকাশ ঘটানো, বিভিন্ন ধরনের সংলাপ উৎসাহিত করে থাকি আমরা চাই যে আমরা যেন আমাদের এই সংলাপ বা এই সম্মেলনের মাধ্যমে সচেতনতা বাড়াতে পারি জনগোষ্ঠী এবং নীতি নির্ধারকদের। এর পাশাপাশি আমাদের একটা ব্যতিক্রম ধর্মী উদ্যোগ ছিল, সেটা আমরা 2014 সালে নেই। সেটা হলো যে আমরা পটুয়াখালী কলাপাড়া উপজেলায় একটি পানি জাদুঘর স্থাপন করি। এর আগে কখনোই বলতে গেলে বাংলাদেশ না, সাউথ এশিয়াতেই ছিল না। এই জাদুঘরটা তৈরি করার পেছনে আমাদের উদ্দেশ্য ছিল যে নদীর অধিকার, পানির সম্পদের যে সঠিক ব্যবহার, এইগুলো জনগণ, স্থানীয় জনগণ বা দেশের জনগণ, নীতি নির্ধারকরা যেন বুঝতে পারে এবং সচেতনতা বাড়ে।
ও তিস্তা নদী রে, তুই ভাঙলি আমার ঘর, তোর কিনারে থাকতাম, তুই করলি আমায় পর, তোর কিনারে থাকতাম, তুই করলি আমায় পর।
Tista River is the fourth major transboundary river in Bangladesh. The river originates from the Lake Kalamu located in the north of the Indian state Sikkim, flows through 3 states in 2 countries and finally merges with Brahmaputra River in Bangladesh. The basin is prone to landslides, floods and erosion. 21 million people in Bangladesh depend on the Teesta River for their livelihood and other economic activities. Teesta River, shared between India and Bangladesh, is home to about 30 million people.
আমার বাপ চাচারা চলছে, গৃহস্থির কাজ করছে, আমরা ছোট ছোট ছিলাম, নদী অনেক দূরে ছিল, তিস্তা নদী। হয়তো দাগে মাঠে যে ফসলগুলা হয়েছে আমরা ভালোই চলতাম। নদীতে বাড়ি ঘর আমাদের ভাঙা যায়, তখন আমাদের আর যাওয়ার জায়গা নাই। জমি যখন নদী চলে গেল, তখন আইসা আমরা এই বাঁধে, সরকারি বাঁধ, একরের জায়গার মধ্যে আমরা বাড়ি করে আসি। যখন জমি ভাঙা গেল, ভাঙা যাওয়ার পর আমার ওই যে পেশা হলো মাছ ধরা।
আবার সুবেদ মেলা কিছু আছে, 6 মাসে মনে করো আলু, গম, কালাই, ভুট্টে মেলা কিছু আবাদ হয়। এখন নদী ভাঙনের পর কোনো আবাদ নাই। আর আগত মনে করো 20-22 হাত ঘর আছিল, গোল ভরা গরু আছিল, খান ধান, বের ভরা ধান আছিল। এখন তো কিছুই নাই, এলা নিত করি নিত খাওয়া।
আর এই চরাঞ্চলে এত ফসল হইতো, ধান, পাট, মরিচ, তামাক, আলু, ভুট্টা, তারপরে আপনার বাদাম, এগুলো অনেক হইতো আর কি। এখন সেটা বন্ধ হয়েছে, নদী ভাঙার পরে এটা বন্ধ হয়েছে।
Both countries have built irrigation projects along the river. In the dry season, the river in Bangladesh remains completely dry, but the monsoon releases of dams exacerbate flood impacts. Every year, thousands of people, especially fishermen and farmers, routinely lose their homes and livelihoods to flash floods and starve during droughts. These problems are being intensified by changing climatic patterns.
এই বর্ষার মাছটা মাছ ধরি, মাছ ধরার পর বর্ষার পরে যখন পানি শুকায় যায়, শুকায় গেলে তো তখন মাছও থাকে না, পানিও কমে যায়।
আগে আমি বিভিন্ন প্রজাতির মাছ ধরতাম, যেমন বোয়াল মাছ, আইর মাছ, বাগার মাছ, ট্যাংরা মাছ, বিভিন্ন ধরনের মাছ ধরতাম, বৈরতি মাছ। ইদানিং মাছ নাই, তত মাছ নাই, মাছ শুধু বৈরতি মাছ পাওয়া যায় আর 2-1টা হঠাৎ মঠাৎ বালিয়া মাছ পাওয়া যায়। আমরা বেশ কয়েকজন মাছ মারছিলাম, তার মধ্যে দেখা যাচ্ছে কেউ ঢাকা গেছে, মাছ যেহেতু নাই, কেউ ঢাকা গেছে, কেউ দিন মজুরি করে, বিভিন্ন জনে বিভিন্ন পেশায় গেছে। আমারও সিদ্ধান্ত আছে, দেখি মাছ না হলে তো সংসার চালাতে পারি না, তাহলে আমাকে যে কোনো একটা পথ খুঁজে বের করতে হবে।
যখন থাকি স্বামীর বাড়িতে আছি তখন থাকি বন্যা, মনে করো ছোট খাতা গ্রামে খালি বন্যা। প্রথম যখন বন্যা ছিল তখন ঘরে বাড়ি উঠছিল, আর এখন দিন দিন বন্যা হয়, ঘরের চকি তলে যায়, ফির আবার বন্যা হয়, আবার হানে মনে করো চাল তলে যাচ্ছে।
এই যে এখানে যে দাঁড়ায় আছি এটাও একটা নদী, এটাও নদী, আমার নৌকাটা শুকনায় পড়ে আছে, ওটাও নদীর মধ্যেই আছে। আমরা বাড়ি করছি এখানে, অনেক এই নালাটা অনেক গভীর ছিল, উজানে ভাত ভাঙিয়া এই নালাগুলা ভর্তি হয়ে গেছে। এখন নৌকা আর সরাসরি অন্য মাসে নিয়ে যাইতে পারি না। একদিকে ব্রিজের গেট আটকা রাখে, উজান থেকে আবার ভারত থেকে পানি আসে, উজানের পানিও ক্ষতি করে। বর্ষা মাসে ব্যারেজের গেট আটকা রাখে, ওই গেটের সাহায্যে আমাদের অনেক ক্ষতি হয়ে যায়।
আমরা এই মানুষের বাড়িতে কাজ করি, এখন তো আমার 3 বার বাড়ি ভাঙাতে, এখন আমরা যে থাকবো কোথায়, আমার সেই বাড়ি নেই, জমি নেই।
এই বন্যা এলাকায় যত নাড়িয়েছি আমার মনে করো কষ্টতে জীবনটা কষ্ট করে যাইছি। মনে করো বাইরের থেকে 10 টাকা টানিয়ে আনি পাই না, বাচ্চা কাচ্চা লেখাপড়া করাইতে কষ্ট, নিজে চলাফেরা করা কষ্ট, নিজে একটা কোনো জিনিসও নিয়ে আনন্দ ফুর্তি করে গেলে তো কষ্ট, টাকা পয়সা না হলে তো কষ্টই থাকবো।
Teesta River remains one of the biggest water disputes between India and Bangladesh since the finalization of the Ganga Water Treaty in 1996.
আসলে যেখানে সমস্যাটা সেটা হলো তিস্তা যেখান থেকে প্রবাহিত হচ্ছে সেটা সিকিম থেকে আসছে, এবং মমতা ব্যানার্জির যেই যুক্তিটা তার মধ্যে কিছুটা আমি মনে করি যে একটা বিষয় আছে যেটা মেনে নেওয়া কঠিন হলেও সত্য। সেটা হলো সিকিম কতখানি পানি পশ্চিমবঙ্গকে দিচ্ছে সেটা কিন্তু আমরা হিসাবে বা দিল্লি হিসাবে রাখতে চাচ্ছে না। আসলেই পশ্চিমবঙ্গে যখন পানিটা আসে, বিশেষ করে শীতের মৌসুমে, তখন পানিটা কিন্তু আসলেই থাকে না, এবং যেই পানিটা একেবারেই থাকে না সেই পানিটা পশ্চিমবঙ্গে কিভাবে শেয়ার করবে। এখন বছরের পর বছর বাংলাদেশ এই রাজনীতির মধ্যে চলে এসেছে। আমরা বছরের পর বছর এটা না করার ফলে আমরা মনে করলাম যে আমাদের নিজেদের একটা সমাধান করা প্রয়োজন, এবং আমাদের যারা এই নিয়ে কাজ করেন তারা একটা সমাধান দেখালেন। সেটা হলো বিশেষ করে বৃষ্টির মৌসুমে যেহেতু প্রচুর পানি চলে আসে, সেই পানিটা যদি আমরা রাখতে পারি, স্টোরেজ করতে পারি, তাহলে একটা সমাধান হতে পারে, এবং সেখান থেকে জিওপলিটিক্সের একটা নতুন মাত্রা আমরা দেখতে পেলাম।
Not just the flow of river water and associated livelihood has altered, the changing river dynamics has also resulted in loss of river-centric cultures.
আগের যুগে অনেক কিছুই হইতো, অনেক স্মৃতি এখন পাল্টে গেছে, দেশের বা এলাকার পরিবর্তন হয়ে গেছে। যেমন এই যে আমরা এই যে নদীতে দাঁড়ায় আছি, এটার মধ্যে পানি ছিল, নৌকা বাইচ খেলা হইতো, আমোদ উৎসাহটা অন্যরকম একটা আনন্দ আমরা উপভোগ করতাম। যেমন চৈত্র মাসে জমিতে আউশ ধান ছিল, মানুষে কান্দিত যে বৃষ্টি হয় না, খরা, ওই ছোট ছোট পোলাপান নিয়ে আমরা নাচা পিছা গায়ে কাদা মাইকা ওই বাড়ি বাড়ি যায় চাউল উঠাইতাম, গান গাইতাম, আল্লাহ মেঘ দে, বৃষ্টি দে, ছায়া দে রে তুই, এরকম একটা গান গাইতাম, গৈর পারতাম কাদা মাটির মধ্যে। এই জিনিসগুলো আসলে এখন নাই।
অ্যাকশন এইড বাংলাদেশ পানির সম্পদের গুরুত্ব, পানির ন্যায্যতা এবং নদীর অধিকার নিয়ে বেশ কিছুদিন ধরে কাজ করে যাচ্ছে। পানি নিয়ে যে বিভিন্ন উদ্ভাবনী চিন্তা, এর বিকাশ ঘটানো, বিভিন্ন ধরনের সংলাপ উৎসাহিত করে থাকি আমরা চাই যে আমরা যেন আমাদের এই সংলাপ বা এই সম্মেলনের মাধ্যমে সচেতনতা বাড়াতে পারি জনগোষ্ঠী এবং নীতি নির্ধারকদের। এর পাশাপাশি আমাদের একটা ব্যতিক্রম ধর্মী উদ্যোগ ছিল, সেটা আমরা 2014 সালে নেই। সেটা হলো যে আমরা পটুয়াখালী কলাপাড়া উপজেলায় একটি পানি জাদুঘর স্থাপন করি। এর আগে কখনোই বলতে গেলে বাংলাদেশ না, সাউথ এশিয়াতেই ছিল না। এই জাদুঘরটা তৈরি করার পেছনে আমাদের উদ্দেশ্য ছিল যে নদীর অধিকার, পানির সম্পদের যে সঠিক ব্যবহার, এইগুলো জনগণ, স্থানীয় জনগণ বা দেশের জনগণ, নীতি নির্ধারকরা যেন বুঝতে পারে এবং সচেতনতা বাড়ে।
ও তিস্তা নদী রে, তুই ভাঙলি আমার ঘর, তোর কিনারে থাকতাম, তুই করলি আমায় পর, তোর কিনারে থাকতাম, তুই করলি আমায় পর।
Teesta River is the fourth major transboundary river in Bangladesh. The river originates from the Lake Kalamu located in the north of the Indian state Sikkim, flows through 3 states in 2 countries and finally merges with Brahmaputra River in Bangladesh. The basin is prone to landslides, floods and erosion. 21 million people in Bangladesh depend on the Tista River for their livelihood and other economic activities. Tista River, shared between India and Bangladesh, is home to about 30 million people.
আমার বাপ চাচারা চলছে গৃহস্থির কাজ করছে, আমরা ছোট ছোট ছিলাম, নদী অনেক দূরে ছিল, তিস্তা নদী, হয়তো দাগে মাঠে যে ফসলগুলা হয়েছে আমরা ভালোই চলতাম। নদীতে বাড়ি ঘর আমাদের ভাঙা যায়, তখন আমাদের আর যাওয়ার জায়গা নাই। জমি যখন নদী চলে গেল তখন আইসা আমরা এই বাঁধে, সরকারি বাঁধ একরের জায়গার মধ্যে আমরা বাড়ি করে আসি। যখন জমি ভাঙা গেল, ভাঙা যাওয়ার পর আমার ওই যে পেশা হলো মাছ ধরা।
আবার সুবেদ মেলা কিছু আছে, 6 মাসে মনে করো আলু, গম, কালাই, ভুট্টে মেলা কিছু আবাদ হয়। এখন নদী ভাঙনের পর কোনো আবাদ নাই। আর আগত মনে করো 20-22 হাত ঘর আছিল, গোল ভরা গরু আছিল, খান ধান বের ভরা ধান আছিল, এখন তো কিছুই নাই, এলা নিত করি নিত খাওয়া।
আর এই চরাঞ্চলে এত ফসল হইতো, ধান, পাট, মরিচ, তামাক, আলু, ভুট্টা, তারপরে আপনার বাদাম, এগুলো অনেক হইতো আর কি। এখন সেটা বন্ধ হয়েছে, নদী ভাঙার পরে এটা বন্ধ হয়েছে।
Both countries have built irrigation projects along the river. In the dry season, the river in Bangladesh remains completely dry, but the monsoon releases of dams exacerbate flood impacts. Every year, thousands of people, especially fishermen and farmers, routinely lose their homes and livelihoods to flash floods and starve during droughts. These problems are being intensified by changing climatic patterns.
এই বর্ষার মাছটা মাছ ধরি, মাছ ধরার পর বর্ষার পরে যখন পানি শুকায় যায়, শুকায় গেলে তো তখন মাছও থাকে না, পানিও কমে যায়।
আগে আমি বিভিন্ন প্রজাতির মাছ ধরতাম, যেমন বোয়াল মাছ, আইর মাছ, বাগার মাছ, ট্যাংরা মাছ, বিভিন্ন ধরনের মাছ ধরতাম, বৈরতি মাছ। ইদানিং মাছ নাই, তত মাছ নাই, মাছ শুধু বৈরতি মাছ পাওয়া যায় আর 2-1টা হঠাৎ মোটাৎ বালিয়া মাছ পাওয়া যায়। আমরা বেশ কয়েকজন মাছ মারছিলাম, তার মধ্যে দেখা যাচ্ছে কেউ ঢাকা গেছে, মাছ যেহেতু নাই, কেউ ঢাকা গেছে, কেউ দিন মজুরি করে, বিভিন্ন জনে বিভিন্ন পেশায় গেছে। আমারও সিদ্ধান্ত আছে, দেখি মাছ না হলে তো সংসার চালাতে পারি না, তাহলে আমাকে যে কোনো একটা পথ খুঁজে বের করতে হবে।
যখন থাকি স্বামীর বাড়িতে আছি তখন থাকি বন্যা, মনে করো ছোট খাতা গ্রামে খালি বন্যা। প্রথম যখন বন্যা ছিল তখন ঘরে বাড়ি উঠছিল, আর এখন দিন দিন বন্যা হয়, ঘরের চকি তলে যায়, ফির আবার বন্যা হয়, আবার হানে মনে করো চাল তলে যাচ্ছে।
এই যে এখানে যে দাঁড়ায় আছি, এটাও একটা নদী, এটাও নদী, আমার নৌকাটা শুকনায় পড়ে আছে, ওটাও নদীর মধ্যেই আছে। আমরা বাড়ি করছি এখানে, অনেক এই নালাটা অনেক গভীর ছিল, উজানে ভাত ভাঙিয়া এই নালাগুলা ভর্তি হয়ে গেছে। এখন নৌকা আর সরাসরি অন্য মাসে নিয়ে যাইতে পারি না। একদিকে ব্রিজের গেট আটকা রাখে, উজান থেকে আবার ভারত থেকে পানি আসে, উজানের পানিও ক্ষতি করে। বর্ষা মাসে ব্যারেজের গেট আটকা রাখে, ওই গেটের সাহায্যে আমাদের অনেক ক্ষতি হয়ে যায়।
আমরা এই মানুষের বাড়িতে কাজ করি, এখন তো আমার 3 বার বাড়ি ভাঙাতে, এখন আমরা যে থাকবো কোথায়, আমার সেই বাড়ি নেই, জমি নেই। এই বন্যা এলাকায় যত নাড়িয়েছি, আমার মনে করো কষ্টতে জীবনটা কষ্ট করে যাইছি। মনে করো বাইরের থেকে 10 টাকা টানিয়ে আনি পাই না, বাচ্চা কাচ্চা লেখাপড়া করাইতে কষ্ট, নিজে চলাফেরা করা কষ্ট, নিজে একটা কোনো জিনিসও নিয়ে আনন্দ ফুর্তি করে গেলে তো কষ্ট, টাকা পয়সা না হলে তো কষ্টই থাকবো।
Tista River remains one of the biggest water disputes between India and Bangladesh since the finalization of the Ganga Water Treaty in 1996.
আসলে যেখানে সমস্যাটা সেটা হলো তিস্তা যেখান থেকে প্রবাহিত হচ্ছে সেটা সিকিম থেকে আসছে, এবং মমতা ব্যানার্জির যেই যুক্তিটা তার মধ্যে কিছুটা আমি মনে করি যে একটা বিষয় আছে যেটা মেনে নেওয়া কঠিন হলেও সত্য। সেটা হলো সিকিম কতখানি পানি পশ্চিমবঙ্গকে দিচ্ছে সেটা কিন্তু আমরা হিসাবে বা দিল্লি হিসাবে রাখতে চাচ্ছে না। আসলেই পশ্চিমবঙ্গে যখন পানিটা আসে, বিশেষ করে শীতের মৌসুমে, তখন পানিটা কিন্তু আসলেই থাকে না, এবং যেই পানিটা একেবারেই থাকে না সেই পানিটা পশ্চিমবঙ্গে কিভাবে শেয়ার করবে। এখন বছরের পর বছর বাংলাদেশ এই রাজনীতির মধ্যে চলে এসেছে। আমরা বছরের পর বছর এটা না করার ফলে আমরা মনে করলাম যে আমাদের নিজেদের একটা সমাধান করা প্রয়োজন, এবং আমাদের যারা এই নিয়ে কাজ করেন তারা একটা সমাধান দেখালেন। সেটা হলো বিশেষ করে বৃষ্টির মৌসুমে যেহেতু প্রচুর পানি চলে আসে, সেই পানিটা যদি আমরা রাখতে পারি স্টোরেজ করতে পারি, তাহলে একটা সমাধান হতে পারে। এবং সেখান থেকে জিওপলিটিক্সের একটা নতুন মাত্রা আমরা দেখতে পেলাম।
Not just the flow of river water and associated livelihood has altered, the changing river dynamics has also resulted in loss of river-centric cultures.
আগের যুগে অনেক কিছুই হইতো, অনেক স্মৃতি এখন পাল্টে গেছে, দেশের বা এলাকার পরিবর্তন হয়ে গেছে। যেমন এই যে আমরা এই যে নদীতে দাঁড়ায় আছি, এটার মধ্যে পানি ছিল, নৌকাবাজ খেলা হইতো। আমোদ উৎসাহটা অন্যরকম একটা আনন্দ আমরা উপভোগ করতাম। যেমন চৈত্র মাসে জমিতে আউশ ধান ছিল, মানুষে কান্দিত যে বৃষ্টি হয় না, খরা। ওই ছোট ছোট পোলাপান নিয়ে আমরা নাচা পিছা গায়ে কাদা মাইকা ওই বাড়ি বাড়ি যায় চাউল উঠাইতাম, গান গাইতাম, আল্লাহ মেঘ দে, বৃষ্টি দে, ছায়া দে রে তুই, এরকম একটা গান গাইতাম, গৈর পারতাম কাদা মাটির মধ্যে। এই জিনিসগুলো আসলে এখন নাই।
অ্যাকশন এইড বাংলাদেশ পানির সম্পদের গুরুত্ব, পানির ন্যায্যতা এবং নদীর অধিকার নিয়ে বেশ কিছুদিন ধরে কাজ করে যাচ্ছে। পানি নিয়ে যে বিভিন্ন উদ্ভাবনী চিন্তা, এর বিকাশ ঘটানো, বিভিন্ন ধরনের সংলাপ উৎসাহিত করে থাকি আমরা চাই যে আমরা যেন আমাদের এই সংলাপ বা এই সম্মেলনের মাধ্যমে সচেতনতা বাড়াতে পারি জনগোষ্ঠী এবং নীতি নির্ধারকদের। এর পাশাপাশি আমাদের একটা ব্যতিক্রম ধর্মী উদ্যোগ ছিল, সেটা আমরা 2014 সালে নেই। সেটা হলো যে আমরা পটুয়াখালী কলাপাড়া উপজেলায় একটি পানি জাদুঘর স্থাপন করি। এর আগে কখনোই বলতে গেলে বাংলাদেশ না, সাউথ এশিয়াতেই ছিল না। এই জাদুঘরটা তৈরি করার পেছনে আমাদের উদ্দেশ্য ছিল যে নদীর অধিকার, পানির সম্পদের যে সঠিক ব্যবহার, এইগুলো জনগণ, স্থানীয় জনগণ বা দেশের জনগণ, নীতি নির্ধারকরা যেন বুঝতে পারে এবং সচেতনতা বাড়ে।
ও তিস্তা নদী রে, তুই ভাঙলি আমার ঘর, তোর কিনারে থাকতাম, তুই করলি আমায় পর।
Parveen, who is the project coordinator. But Shanaz, I'll request you to wait for a little while because Minket, if she needs to add anything or wants to say something more about the film, I want to invite her. I'll give her 2 minutes, Minket, and then we'll come back to you again. Is that all right? Because the flow would otherwise be disrupted. Minket, are you with us?
Yes.
Is there
Yes,
something
ma'am.
you want to add? Because your film is quite comprehensive. It's covered many dimensions. Or you could come, is there something more you would like to add here?
I would like to add, but if it's just to say, like, this is basically not just talking about the dams. I shot this film in 2015 and 16, so the women dimensions are yet to. I would like to talk about it, so I will connect later. It's just that I have an electricity fluctuation going on, so I'm just a little wary. So yeah, but I'm here.
Well, first of all, congratulations on the film. And as I said, it covers, so it's so beautiful, and the flow and the nature-based approach, and disruption by us, the humans, and in the name of development, it comes out very strongly. Thank you, Minkit, for understanding. Shanaz Parveen, I would like to invite her, the project coordinator of TROSA, TROSA project, Gono Unnayan Kendro. Shanaz, you have 5 minutes. I understand you have to leave at 4, you have a meeting. And I am requesting Ajay and Nilomi to be flexible. Thank you for understanding. Shanaz? Do we have Shanaz?
Shanazapa, you need to unmute yourself.
Is it okay? Can you hear me?
Yes, yes. Please go ahead. I understand you have to leave at 4. Is that so?
I like to.
আপনি বলেন, আমরা শুনতে পাচ্ছি, বলেন।
আচ্ছা. Sorry, I want to take some earlier because uncertainly I have another meeting starting. very few minutes. So আমি একটু বাংলায় বলতে চাই
কোনো
যদি
অসুবিধা নেই,
আপনাদের
বলেন। জি।
অসুবিধা না থাকে। আমি শাহনাজ, আমি কাজ করি গণ উন্নয়ন কেন্দ্রে। আমরা অ্যাকচুয়ালি অক্সফামের সাপোর্টে টোসা একটি প্রজেক্টে কাজ করছি, ট্রান্সবাউন্ডারি রিভার ফর সাস্টেনেবল অ্যাডভান্সমেন্ট। এই প্রজেক্টটি অ্যাকচুয়ালি মানে সরাসরি লাইভলিহুড প্রজেক্ট না, এটা রিসার্চ বেস একটা প্রজেক্ট। নদীর রক্ষায়, নদীর শাসন ব্যবস্থা নিয়ে এই প্রকল্পটি কাজ করছে। আমি খুব আনন্দিত এবং ধন্যবাদ জানাচ্ছি যে এই ধরনের একটি আয়োজনে আমাকে এখানে ইনভাইট করা হয়েছে। আমি চৈতি আপার একটু আগে রিপোর্টটা পড়ছিলাম, যেটা হচ্ছে তিস্তার নারীদের অ্যাডাপ্টেশন লাইভলিহুড নিয়ে উনি চমৎকার বিস্তারিত আলোচনা করেছেন। আপার আলোচনার সাথে আসলে আমার আলোচনাটা হয়তো সাপ্লিমেন্ট করবে। আমি যেহেতু একদম সরাসরি মাঠ পর্যায়ে কাজ করি, আসলে তিস্তা নদীর যে নেচার, সেই নেচারটিকে একটু আমাদেরকে, আমরা সবাই জানি যদিও, তারপর একটু বলতে চাই যে তিস্তা নিয়ে আসলে কখনোই অনুমান করা যায় না, অনুমান নির্ভর করে তিস্তার সাথে কখনোই কাজ করা যায় না। আমরা তিস্তাতে কাজ করতে গিয়ে দেখেছি যে, সরি আমার এখানে ইলেকট্রিসিটি চলে গেল। আমরা তিস্তা নিয়ে কাজ করতে গিয়ে দেখেছি যে তিস্তাতে যে তিস্তার যে ভাঙন, সেই ভাঙনটাই আসলে তিস্তা নদীর পাড়ের মানুষের মানে জীবন এবং জীবিকার জন্য সব থেকে বড় ঝুঁকিপূর্ণ। আমাকে কি শোনা যাচ্ছে?
জি জি, আপনাকে শোনা যাচ্ছে, পরিষ্কার শোনা যাচ্ছে। আমরা বুঝতেও পারছি যে আপনার ইলেকট্রিসিটি চলে গেছে, আপনি যে সেটাও বোঝা যাচ্ছে। জি বলেন। এখন
আমরা তিস্তার পাড়ে কাজ করতে গিয়ে যেটা দেখেছি, বলছিলাম, সেটা হচ্ছে যে প্রত্যেক বছরই তিস্তাতে 2-3 বার করে বন্যা হয় এবং এই বন্যার সময় যে এই ভাঙনের ফলে আসলে তিস্তা পাড়ের মানুষের কিন্তু যে জীবিকা, সেটা স্বাভাবিক জীবন জীবিকার মতো না। তাদেরকে প্রত্যেক বছরই 2-3 বার ফাইট করতে হয় এই নদী ভাঙন বন্যার সাথে। এখন এখানটাতে আমরা যেটা দেখেছি সেটা হচ্ছে যে নদীর মানে যে গতিবিধি এবং নদীর পাড়ের যে নদীকে নিয়ে অনেকেরই অনেক ধরনের যে আগ্রহ রয়েছে, সেই জায়গা থেকে আসলে নদীর মানে প্রস্থেও কিছু পরিবর্তন এসছে, যার কারণে নদীর নেচারটাও পরিবর্তন হয়ে গেছে। এখানে আমরা দেখেছি যে নদীর পাড়ে যে নারীরা থাকেন, যে পরিবারগুলো বসবাস করেন, যে কমিউনিটিতে যে পরিবারগুলো বসবাস করেন, সেখানে দেখেছি যে প্রত্যেকবারই যখন আসলে বন্যা হয়, যেটা চৈতি আপা বলছিলেন যে নারীদেরকে আসলে বন্যার সময় অনেক বেশি দায়িত্ব পালন করতে হয়, অনেক বেশি তাদেরকে রোল অ্যান্ড রেসপন্সিবিলিটির মধ্যে সাথে থাকতে হয়। আমরা সেই জায়গায় দেখেছি যে বন্যার সময় কিন্তু পরিবারের সবাই চলে গেলেও ওই বাড়ি পাহারা দেবার জন্য কিন্তু নারীদেরকে থেকে যেতে হয়। তো সেখানে পরিবারের যে অন্য নারী সদস্যদের যে নিরাপত্তা, সেই বিষয়টি কিন্তু খুবই মানে ঝুঁকির মধ্যে থাকে। মানে আমাদের এইদিকে আমরা যে এলাকাগুলোতে কাজ করছি তিস্তার পাড়ে, সেখানে ম্যাক্সিমাম জায়গাতেই হচ্ছে ফ্লাড শেল্টার গুলো নাই। সেখানে নারীরা যে জায়গাগুলোতে মানে অল্প সময়ের জন্য অবস্থান করে, সেগুলো খুবই ঝুঁকিপূর্ণ। খুব একটা মানে নারীদের জন্য সংবেদনশীল পরিবেশ বা পরিস্থিতি তৈরি হয়েছে এখানে, এরকম না। এটা একটা বিষয়। আর একটা জিনিস হচ্ছে যে লাইভলিহুডের ক্ষেত্রে আসলে আমরা যেটা চিন্তা করি আর কি, সেটা হচ্ছে যে বন্যা হবেই, নদী ভাঙন থাকবেই, এটা তো আসলে আমরা চাইলেও প্রাকৃতিক এই পরিস্থিতি পরিবর্তন করতে পারবো না। এটিকে মোকাবেলা করবার জন্যই আসলে আমাদেরকে কিছু মানে কৌশল, কিছু অ্যাডাপ্টেশন গ্রহণ করতে হবে, যেটার মধ্য দিয়ে আসলে আমরা আমাদের টিকিয়ে রাখতে পারি। তো আমরা দেখেছি যে মানে নদীর পাড়ের যে যেটা চৈতি আপাও বললেন, সেটা হচ্ছে যে নদীর পাড়ের নারীদের আসলে অ্যাডাপ্টেশন মানে ক্ষমতাটা বেড়েছে, পাশাপাশি ওদের আয়ও বেড়েছে, এটাও ঠিক, পরিবারে তাদের কন্ট্রিবিউশনও বেড়েছে। কিন্তু নারীর মানে আমাদের বাংলাদেশের বা মানে নারীর জীবনের যে মানে প্রতিদিনের যে চ্যালেঞ্জ গুলো, প্রতিদিনের যে সমস্যাগুলো, সেগুলো কিন্তু মানে গতানুগতিকই থেকে গেছে। নারী কন্ট্রিবিউট করতে পারছে বলে যে তার জীবনযাত্রা বা তার মতামত বা সিদ্ধান্তের খুব একটা প্রাধান্য দিচ্ছে, এরকম না। আমাদের এখানে আমরা দেখেছি যে আমরা যে এলাকায় কাজ করি সেখানে দেখেছি যে 2টা কমিউনিটিতে মানে মৎস্যজীবীরা বসবাস করে। তো যখন বন্যা হয় তখন কিন্তু এই মৎস্যজীবীদেরও অনেক জায়গায় শিফট করতে হয়। আবার নরমালি দেখা যায় যে অনেক পরিবারে বন্যার কারণে ভেঙে গেছে, ক্ষতিগ্রস্ত হয়েছে, তারা অন্যত্র বসবাস করছিল আবার ফিরে এসছে। কিন্তু তাদের মধ্যে সব থেকে বেশি ক্ষতিগ্রস্ত হয় হচ্ছে যে যাদের স্বামী নেই বা যারা আসলে মানে বিধবা, যাদের পরিবারে পুরুষ কোনো সদস্য নেই, এদেরকে কিন্তু অনেক বেশি মানে চ্যালেঞ্জ মোকাবেলা করতে হয়। আমরা অনেক মানে মৎস্যজীবী কমিউনিটিতে কাজ করতে গিয়ে দেখেছি যে সেখানে নারীরা মানে মাছ চাষ করবে বা মৎস্য পেশাটাকে তারা নিজেরা গ্রহণ করবে, এটা কমিউনিটি মানে গ্রহণ করতে চায় না। এটা কমিউনিটিতে খুব একটা মানে অ্যাপ্রিসিয়েটেড কাজ না, তারা এটা কোনোভাবেই দিতে চায় না। আবার যে সমস্ত পরিবারগুলোতে আসলে পুরুষ সদস্যরাই মৎস্যজীবী, সেখানে দেখা যাচ্ছে যে নারীটা ওই মৎস্য ব্যবস্থার আনুষঙ্গিক সব কাজগুলোই করছে, কিন্তু যেহেতু সে সেল করতে পারে না, যেহেতু সে ইয়েতে যেতে পারবে না, মার্কেটে যেতে পারবে না, সেই ক্ষেত্রে অনেক সময় নারীদের সাথে কথা বলে দেখা গেছে তারা বলেছে যে আমি তো আসলে এই ব্যবসার সাথে যুক্ত হতে পারবো না, কারণ আমি তো আসলে বাজার বুঝি না, আমাকে তো মার্কেটে জায়গা দেবে না। আমাদের এইদিকে কিছু কিছু ছোট ছোট মানে নারী ব্যবসায়ী হয়েছেন যারা মানে মৎস্য ব্যবসার সাথে যুক্ত, কিন্তু তারা আসলে ডাইরেক্ট মার্কেটে ইনভলভ হতে পারেন না, এটা একটা ব্যাপার। আরেকটা হচ্ছে যে মৎস্য ব্যবস্থার জন্য যে ইনভেস্টমেন্টটা লাগে সেটা তো আসলে নারীর নাই। এটার জন্য যে পরিমাণে তার আয় ইনভেস্টমেন্ট করতে হবে, সেই বড় বড় ধরনের ইনভেস্টমেন্ট গুলো আসলে পুরুষের হাতে। তারপর হচ্ছে এখানে আমরা দেখেছি যে যারা মৎস্য ব্যবসার সাথে জড়িত তাদের অরিজিনালি যারা মৎস্য ব্যবসায়ী তাদের বাইরেও কিন্তু মানে কিছু মানুষ যারা টাকা দিয়ে জলমহল আইডেন্টিফাই করে সেই জায়গাগুলোতে আসলে যারা রেগুলার অরিজিনালি মৎস্যজীবী তারা যেতে পারে না। তো এই যে পরিবারগুলো ক্ষতিগ্রস্ত হয়, এর ইফেক্ট কিন্তু যে পড়ে নারীটার উপরে। দেখা যায় যে অল্প বয়সে তখন পারিবারিক অভাবের কারণে তখন দেখা যাচ্ছে যে মেয়েটাকে অল্প বয়সে বিয়ে দিয়ে দিচ্ছে। আর যেটা বলছিলাম যে পরিবারগুলোতে আসলে মানে উইমেন হেডেড, যেখানে পুরুষ নারী কোনো হ্যালো
বলেন বলেন
যেখানে
আপনাকে আর 1
নারীরা
মিনিট দেওয়া হবে, আপনাকে আর 1 মিনিট দেওয়া হবে।
আমি
জি।
শেষ করে দিব আপা। তো আমার কাছে যেটা মনে হয় সেটা হচ্ছে যে নারীরা আসলে অ্যাডাপ্টেশনে এগিয়ে এসছে, যেমন পাশাপাশি হচ্ছে আমাদেরকে আসলে চিন্তা করতে হবে যে ওই কমিউনিটিতে যে নারীরা মানে যে পণ্যটা তৈরি করছে সেই পণ্যটা বাজার মানে লিঙ্কেজের ক্ষেত্রে আমরা যদি আসলে তাদেরকে একটা সুযোগ করে দিই, গ্রাম থেকে একদম ভ্যালু চেইন করে সেটা একদম ইয়েতে যাবে, মানে মার্কেটে লিঙ্কেজটা করে দেওয়া যায়, এটা একটা বিষয়। আরেকটা বিষয় মনে হয় যে ওই জায়গাতে নারীদের জীবনযাপনের সাথে যেগুলো যুক্ত, যে বন্যার সময় যে বিষয়গুলো লাগে, যেমন শুকনামুড়ি, প্যাডের সমস্যা, হ্যাঁ, এই জায়গাগুলোতেই যদি নারীদেরকে ডেভেলপ করা যায়, মানে বিকল্প কোনো আয়ের কর্মসংস্থানের জন্য তাদেরকে ডেভেলপ করা যায়, এবং তারা ওই কমিউনিটিতে থেকেই, যেহেতু প্রত্যেক বছর আমার বন্যা হবে, আমাকে তো ওই জায়গায় মানে শিফট করতে হচ্ছে প্রত্যেকবার, ওই জায়গাগুলোতেই যদি আসলে নারীদেরকে এরকম, আমরা কয়েকটা ছোট ছোট প্রজেক্ট নিয়ে দেখেছি যে নারীরা চর এলাকায় এখন প্যাড তৈরি করা শিখেছে, সেখানকার মেয়েরা হাইজিন মেনটেন করছে। এই বিষয়গুলো আমাদের কাছে মনে হয়েছে যে এটা কাজ করতে পারে। আরেকটা জিনিস হচ্ছে যে চরের নারী এবং পুরুষ, বন্যা হয়ে গেলে তো আসলে নারী আর পুরুষ আলাদা মানে ইফেক্টেড হয় এরকম না, কিন্তু আমাদের সোশ্যাল কনটেক্সটের কারণে আসলে নারীদের যে চাপগুলো বহন করতে হয় সেটার কারণে আমরা নারীদের প্রতি গুরুত্ব দেওয়ার কথা বলছি। কিন্তু বন্যার যে ক্ষতি, সে ক্ষতিগ্রস্ত মানে পুরো পরিবার। সেই কারণে আমার কাছে মনে হয় যে আসলে আমরা যদি নদীর পার রক্ষা করা যায় কিভাবে, এবং পরিকল্পিতভাবে বালু উত্তোলনটা করা, নদীটা যেন না ভাঙে। দেখা যাচ্ছে যে যখন পানি কমে যায় তখন বালুগুলো তুলে ফেলে, কিন্তু আবার যখন পানি আসে তখন কিন্তু ওই বালুটা পরিকল্পিতভাবে না তোলার কারণে ভেঙে যাচ্ছে, ঘর বাড়ি ভেঙে যাচ্ছে, ওখান থেকে শিফট করতে হচ্ছে। এই বিষয়গুলো আমি মানে আমরা আমাদের যে কমিউনিটি, আমাদের যে উইমেনরা নদীর পাড়ে বসবাস করে, তাদেরকে আসলে ওয়াটার উইমেন লিডার হিসাবে আমরা ডেভেলপ করার চেষ্টা করছি। এবং তারা কিন্তু বিভিন্ন জায়গায় যে অবৈধ বালু উত্তোলন করছে সেটা নিয়ে কিন্তু অ্যাডভোকেসি করছেন। তারা লোকাল গভর্নমেন্টের সাথে, তারা টিওনো মহোদয়কে অনেক জায়গায় ইনফর্ম করেছেন এবং অবৈধ বালু উত্তোলন বন্ধ হয়েছে। তো আমরা মানে উইমেন লিডারশিপের যে জায়গাটা, সেই জায়গাটা আসলে যদি
আমি কিন্তু আপনাকে অন্যদেরকে বাদ অ্যাডজাস্ট করেছি, সো আপনি যদি থাকেন তা আবার আসবো শাহনাজ, নাহলে আমাকে আমাদের এর আগে নির্ধারিত যে দুজন বক্তা ছিলেন আমি তার কাছে যেতে হবে। হ্যাঁ, তো দেখেন, হ্যাঁ থাকতে পারলে খুব ভালো লাগবে। আমি আপনাকে অনেক ধন্যবাদ। শাহনাজ was talking about the impact of the changes in the river and ecosystem and the flooding. And while Zareen Yasmin Choiti has mentioned the adaptation skills and qualities of women and how they don't see themselves as victim, but they are more agency and they have engaged in income generating. So they are coping, there's adaptation, and they're living with the present reality of the Tista. Now I want to bring it back, and Ajay, thank you for being patient. And you know, as I was mentioning that Ajay has a long history of, he's an engineer by training, but he has a long history in working on water and river. And so listening to the two presentations, you know, one from Bangladesh and also from Sikkim, it was not just it brought in the social dimensions, the livelihood dimensions, the displacement and the gender discrimination and the roles and so on. But also we heard strongly from Sikkim about how dam or infrastructure based development has impacted the community and what is being lost. So if you would share some of your thoughts, and you've also heard about adaptation and solutions. So if there's anything you want to add there. So over to you, Ajay. Thank you.
Thank you, Farah, and thank you, Actionaid, for giving me this opportunity. It's really learning. I really would like to thank Zareen and Minket.
We need to increase the volume because.
Sorry. Can you hear me?
Better.
Yeah.
Better. Maybe the IT team can also help. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think as you said, Farah, I'm a trained engineer. I was educated as a civil engineer way back in the 70s. And then I was a teacher. I was a hydraulics teacher in Kathmandu Institute of Engineering for 10 years, 1980 to 1990. In fact, none of these aspects that were discussed were taught to me when I was a student, and I did not teach when I was a teacher. Right? These questions, these issues were very, very peripheral. You know, these did not appear in the way we imagined, understood, and kind of transferred water knowledge. You see, now this is important because the change, the decisions on water, on river is actually taken by this collective, this collective where this education kind of forms the foundation. It forms the basis within which this, you use the term agency, the term, the hydraulic agency which is organized and in conceptualizing water. None of these things were in our mind, So when Zareen talked about, the climate impacts and the way adaptation strategies some of these, women are taking, it was interesting. It was kind of a story you would also find in other parts of South Asia, in Nepal perhaps. I would have liked her to maybe also talk a little bit about whether these, additional activities that they are doing, that's fine, but then whether they have added more drudgery to their, being. A little bit of touch on that would have been sort of, a little more expanding. But what I like is, she was an alumni of ANU. I'm also an alumni of ANU. And I'm sure she must have worked with my friend, Kuntala Lahiri Datta. And then, of course, Minket's video documentary is very powerful, very touching. And in fact, this idea, this imagination of water, the idea of faith, the idea of culture, the idea of sort of intergenerational continuity, starting from your forefathers and then going back into your future, is not something which is part of the mainstream understanding and imagination of water. I'm sure this must be something that was discussed in the structural part of the discussion. It's more about modifying stock and flow. It's more about seeing water more as a commercial entity, as one of the sort of protagonists in the video was saying, okay, we build this dam and then it generates so much energy, it generates so much revenue, so on and so forth. So water is seen more in its production role, more in its kind of money generating role. And then when that role gets domination, when that role is emphasized, the other values, the other multiple values of water, things like livelihood, things like ecology, things like culture, things like faith becomes peripheral. They don't become part of a larger whole. Now, of course, over the last 30 years, if I look at the kind of narrative, the hydro agency, the structural agency have become more smart. They have kind of co-opted the language. They do talk about ecology. They do talk about gender and social inclusion. They do talk about these other values.
Ajay, do you have earphones?
Actually, I don't.
Okay, that's okay. All right.
So what I find is, the more the things change, the more they stay the same. You see, they don't seem to have changed much. Now, I don't know much about Tista, but this is kind of a revelation. But then if I come west to Nepal, and then to look at some of the ongoing sort of events in Nepal, the stories are not very different. There is a huge emphasis on structural interventions, particularly hydropower. We have about 1,400 megawatts today, about 10,000 megawatts another 4 to 5 years. Lots of dams being built, lots of interbasin transfer projects. And of course, one of the biggest casualty of this intervention is that the flow in the river is now diverted into tunnels. You have no flow in the river. So therefore, the livelihood, the ecology, the other uses in the downstream rivers get sort of, disrupted. They don't get water for those meeting those values. Of course, I just wanted to highlight a couple of points. One point is that, there is an idea called ecosystem flow, that every dam must have, a minimum flow that should allow it to be sort of, in the river. There is a question about what is ecosystem flow, how much quantity. Those questions remain. And then, of course, the story of a river dry, the story of river not having water, it's same, like in Tista. Upstream of dam you have water, downstream of dam you have no water. So clearly that has implication on livelihood, particularly on women. Now, the policies emphasize or mention that 10% of the flow is required to be released by a dam and a proponent. Between 2018 and 2019, I led a multi-stakeholder dialogue in Nepal, talking with different stakeholders, because none of the dams in Nepal release those stipulated flows. So I kind of, took this study, talked with different actors. They involved, the department, the government agency, Department of Irrigation, Ministry of Forest and Environment, the private hydropower producers, ecologists, consultants, researchers, one of the users in the documentary was a rafting guide. I talked with rafting agencies. They all agree that rivers have to have minimum clean flowing water, and that policies have to be adhered to. That at least 10%. Forget whether it is at the moment adequate or not. Those are different questions. But at least if you have a policy, you comply with the policy. What we found out in that dialogue was that there is no compliance, that there is very different interpretation of the policy. There is no clarity as to who would do what at what level. So therefore, it does stand as a policy statement. It's not then kind of implemented in the field. So clearly, as a way forward, meetings such as this are very, very useful. You need to continue to work on things like, what does the ecosystem flow constitute? How do you integrate into land and water management? Whether they are adequate, in what river basin, in what river stretch, the nature of the river. More fundamental question is, how do you bring in community or local level actors who are more close to the river in monitoring these compliances? What role they have? At least in Nepal, there is no such situation. So clearly there is much greater need for these kind of conversations and dialogue, not just within a country, but perhaps across disciplines and across geographical regions. Even within the country, it's a pretty difficult enterprise. It's a pretty difficult task, because the domination, the mission of, if I call it a hydraulic mission, it's so dominating that everything else seems to be kind of secondary. So clearly, you need much greater conversation and dialogue. And then at the end of the day, you see, river conservation and meeting these values, the multiple values, that the river is just not energy, it's also many different things to benefit people. So bringing these multiple values of river into the mainstream is about, at the operational level, making choices. It's very difficult and tough choices. Now that cannot happen by 1 or 2% doing it. So it has to have a continuous, if I say, a social compact, a conversation and dialogue. And for a river like Tista, which is a transboundary river, this is much more complex. The complexity kind of exponentially goes up. So as I said, the journey continues. As I said, the more the things change, the more they stay the same. But then it was very educative to listen to some of the presentation and the video, and hopefully the short comment, and I'll stop at this.
Ajay, thank you so much. It was a bit of a struggle hearing you, but I think we got the gist of it. And I also agree with you that the need for the agency of the community across the countries need to be harnessed, and we need to have a greater movement, because in Minkid's film also there was, it was quite clear that there was a movement and the mobilization, and that led to some of the changes, however incremental, but it was there. So do stay with us, Ajay. If there are questions, we'll come back. And Nirolmi, can I request you? Sharmin Nirolmi is a professor at Jahangirnagar University. She's known for her research on gender and climate change, and for years she has been also part of the COP negotiations and presenting at different places. We are partners in crime, because we both strongly believe in the gendered policies and gendered negotiations. So over to you, Nirolmi.
Thank you, Farapa, and thank you for inviting me to this important event. And I'm especially honored that I am sharing the platform with Dr. Ajay Dikshit. We have been known to each other since long, and I had the privilege to read his papers work with him in some occasions, and those were quite enlightening. And I will start with Ajay actually to make my frame for today's intervention. I will start with Marcus Moench and Ajay Dixit's definition of adaptation, which we considered as advanced definition of adaptation which was published in 2007, where they say that adaptation is creating an environment which is better than ever before, defying climate change. So it's not mere coping, it's not mere survival. And Ajay, even in his today's intervention, he very modestly tried to focus on that the practices, those have been focused in keynote presentation, and the struggles that has been portrayed in the film. Traditionally, centuries after centuries, people have been trying that, and those are mere survival. And cooking on a bamboo raft is not a choice. So we need to go beyond that, and belonging to a middle income country and an aspiring country in 2040 for a middle income country, actually that's not the scenario that we call survival. So I will basically focus on some of the issues regarding challenges, and then I will try to light on some of the pathways that we can think of to overcome that challenges. We all know that Tista is a flashy basin, as well as it has problems with sand casting, which actually create degradation of soil quality. And the cropping pattern, if you compare it with the other parts of Bangladesh, Tista, being the northern part of Bangladesh, is the most poverty-stricken area in Bangladesh, especially the northern part of Tista Basin, which even few years earlier has been struggling to get rid of monga, the seasonal food insecurity. That was the part of, where ultra poor, most incidents of ultra poverty we can see. Why that has been historically over there, having different development strides by the government in other areas in Bangladesh. If you consider agriculture, then the cropping intensity is lower here compared to other parts of Bangladesh. Why that is so? Because of the flashy nature of Tista Basin, the farmers here have to opt for early almond, which is rain-fed monsoon seasonal crop. And for choosing early almond variety, farmers need to compromise the productivity so that the average productivity per unit of land is lower in Tista Basin. And for sandy nature of this soil, I can refer you a data that less than 10% of promised water supply for irrigation is covered by the Tista. And because of the sandy nature, the retention capacity of water is very low. So the borough is not that much vibrant in this basin. That is actually very much vibrant in other part of Bangladesh. So this dimension actually force the farmers to concentrate on production like pumpkins, production like potatoes. And pumpkins, in chore areas, Shana Appa was telling that pumpkins, when they are produced, the farm gate price are very low. And for potato, this belt is the largest supplier of potato, but because of insufficient cold storage, the price the farmers get, that doesn't cover their cost of production. So the livelihood of farmers in that areas are not that much attractive. For fisheries, where it was about 85,000 metric tons in even early 20s, before 2010, it has now become less than 1,000 metric tons. So you can see that these are all linked to livelihoods. And these are all manifestations in poverty in many ways. I can cite one example. For example, tube oil for drinking water. The coverage of tube oils, per tube oil dependence in terms of number of households is highest here. So why that is so? Because of poverty, the installation of tube oil were not that much in this region. Those can, in compared to other parts of Bangladesh. So there are lack of public investment and private investment in drinking water facilities, which brings up many waterborne diseases to women, men, young girls, and it has its own manifestations, social manifestations. So just one example and one data we can, that can substantiate that what kind of poverty manifestation we have been experiencing in this area. So what we can do? We know that Bangladesh is a living delta, and there are river erosion, as well as there are land accretion in some areas. So this is a continuum process. And to my knowledge, the modeling exercise that where the river will be eroded in what time frame, that is much matured in Ganges and Brahmaputra Basin. But there is little understanding in Tista Basin. So if we don't know where the basin on Tista River will be eroded in 5 years' time, and we have been making an investment on that in terms of infrastructure, in terms of making men's and women's livelihoods, that will erode it eventually. So I would rather emphasize that this knowledge of modeling exercise of river erosion that we exercise for Ganges and Brahmaputra. We need to build up that for Tista Basin so that if the area is risky, we will not go for further investment. We will not, build a potato cold storage over there. So I would rather emphasis on those alternative livelihoods which will enable the inhabitants of this basin to overcome the shocks like COVID, like riverbank erosions, meaning they will uplift their situation to a level that they can sustain certain shocks. That might not be agriculture, land-based agriculture, maybe land-based agriculture, but that land needs to be sustainable and the productivity needs to be enhanced. The cropping intensity needs to be enhanced. And depending on the soil quality, then the Bari and Biri and other agriculture research institute needs to be mobilized with agriculture extension services to our women farmers and men farmers for those new technologies and accepted machineries. And again, I would suggest positive discrimination in investment in Tista Basin. Meaning, these are the most backward place in terms of poverty. So better invest greater share of our budget in this part that will actually eventually pay us off in a better way. Thank you.
Thank you, Nilomi. I think that was a very good point to end, that we need, I think, my takeaway is that we can't use the same modeling that we did for other rivers, and we have to understand this. Then also positive discrimination regarding investment. So we have Hassanul Haq Inu, who's a member of the parliament, and as a policy maker, perhaps he will take this with him, that there has to be greater investment. We have with us voices from the grassroots. So I will stop myself from speaking now and invite. So Ruksa, will you please ensure that we can have our three grassroots voices? We have Zareen Ahmed, who's the communications coordinator for Youth Environmental Initiative. And then we have Chaya Namju, who's from West Bengal Development Board, Lepcha Development Board. And then we have Mayal Mit, Lepcha, General Secretary of the Affected Citizens of Tista. So Ruksa, over to you.
Yes, thank you, Farapa. So I think Appa, the way we initially planned was, I think after Minkit, we will have them, but instead what we can do right now is they can do their grassroots reflection, then we can wrap up with Minkit.
Yes, I think it would make sense to, we hear the grassroots voices, then we'll come back to the discussants. We'll give them Minkit and others 1 minute. Yeah.
Thank you, Farapa. So with that said, I would like to welcome Ms. Zareen Ahmed, who is the Communication Coordinator of Bangladesh Youth Environmental Initiative, also known as BYEI. Ms. Zareen, if you can please turn on your camera and your mic. Thank you.
For letting me, giving me the chance to speak. It has been an experience listening.
Ms. Ahmed, your camera is off. Yes. Ms. Ahmed, can you speak again? I think there is some bandwidth issues from your audio side. Hello?
Hear me as well.
Yes, I
Uh-oh.
think please hold your mouthpiece closer. I think there is an issue with the mouthpiece. Yes, perfect. Yes, I think this will work.
Okay, so is it okay now?
Yes.
Okay, so again, thank you for giving me the chance to speak. It has been amazing hearing to you all. So I am Zareen. I have been working with different organizations on different capacities, but mostly on communications aspect. So I'm not really not a participant of the grassroots. I mean, I haven't experienced the things firsthand, but I've worked with the communities and I've spoken with them. So that way I have listened to their experiences and the issues they have been facing, the challenges. So as a communication person, I would like to bring those stories up to here for everybody's knowledge. So most of the things have already been covered with in the previous by the previous speakers. For example, um, the vulnerabilities of women being in those areas, they're facing more challenges than the men there, as they have been left behind in their houses when men are moving away for their livelihoods, and then the increased load of their work in recent days, though that has been referred to as adaptation, but that has kind of increased the loads on them. Then also we can one of the most prime challenges that they have been facing is the lack of access to the basic services like health services or education, and then the basics really, because the women in the Tista Basin, they have been facing floods, and their houses, they're losing their homes there, and though their homes are being flooded away, they have been living in places with that where the water rises up to their throat and the chest or waist. Up to that level, they have to leave their houses to and stay somewhere beside a shop or somewhere to be safe. But even with so much water around, they really don't have a drop to drink. It is like what they say, like water everywhere, but not any drop to drink. So also they don't have any scope to earn a livelihood, even though when they try, they have to depend on their a male partner to earn a living, and most of the time it's not so. Like for example, one of my, like, I have interviewed a lot of women, so women in the living on the floody areas. So one of the women, she also, even she holds a positive approach towards life, but even she went up to a point where she was like, okay, I have been this I have faced so much struggles that even at one point I wanted to leave my child. She's a woman who has been working in the health sector in her area. She has been supporting other women during their pregnancies. Even when there's flood, she would take them to the nearest health services. Even the nearest health service is like a far away from their living area. She would help them, and but even such a positive person also like thought of leaving her own child because the system was I wonder like why this system is like that. A woman would have to kind of think up to that level, like take such a risk, and then but then she was like, okay, I couldn't do it, but of course I have thought of doing it. And even during the pregnancies, the women are sent off to their parents' houses because the support of the male partners or the people living in their in-laws are not enough. And this is kind of part of the culture that they have to go back to their parents' house during the pregnancies. So I see that those, there are a lot of challenges that they've been facing. So I kind of wonder, when are these issues are actually going to grab some attention of the policymakers. Like these are not the only challenges they face. They have been facing discrimination for a long time, and this is we've been speaking about this for a long time. So when do we actually see some policies that safeguard both the people and the nature, kind of? So
Thank you, Ms. Ahmed. We are actually running way behind schedule, so I'll request you. I think that was a good summary to end at that point. Maybe we'll let you speak again when we have the Q&A session. Thank you so much. So Ms. Ahmed was talking from her experience from Bangladesh. Now I will request Ms. Chaya Namchu. She is affiliated with the West Bengal Lepcha Development Board, and she is representing the voices of the grassroots from West Bengal. So Ms. Chaya, over to you. I see there is some kind of screen sharing.
Yeah, I'm just sharing a PPT. Yeah.
Okay, Ms. Chaya, we have 5 minutes.
Yeah, yes,
Okay.
I'll try to make it as short as concise as possible. So I'm Chaya and I live in West Bengal in India. So this is the mid hills of West Bengal, wherein the Tista is flowing, as you can see in the picture. A lot of the images you might have been familiar from Minkit's movie presentation, but this is just to give you an idea of how, you know, the Tista looks like in West Bengal and also in Sikkim. So the Tista is home to us. I have worked on the Tista professionally, but I also have a personal relationship to it because we come from a region where Tista is the root home. So Tista flows from Sikkim and it flows then into the West Bengal areas, and from the mid hills it goes into downstream Jalpaiguri, from where it enters Bangladesh. So that is the flow of the river. So wherever we travel, anywhere from Kalimpong to Sikkim to Siliguri and even Bhutan, we have to take the road that runs parallel to the Tista. So it's very personal to us, irrespective of whether we are a riverine community or not. It is what blocks or sometimes, you know, leads us to our home. So as the movie has already shown, there is a spiritual, cultural relationship to the river, but there's also an economic significance. You know, there are a lot of fishing, farming communities across, like all river communities. But what has happened with the Tista, especially in the mid hills, is now that the developmental infrastructure, the developmental priorities are on top of any other planning that takes place. So if you look into the mid hills, women have more mobility. So women, you will see them working in public spaces. You will see them working as daily wage workers in the farming, and sometimes even, you know, running their own shop. But this does not mean that they enjoy a good position or they have access to institutions or, you know, to administrative units or even to health facilities. It does not mean it only means that they have increased burdens of household as well as public spaces. So also, you know, in the movie, we saw that there is this hydro projects dam coming in, but parallel to these projects are also road constructions that keep on happening again and again, because, you know, these areas are so vulnerable to climate change as well as infrastructure, that there are landslides that we have throughout the year, and especially most in monsoon. So there are new road constructions that come in all the time. And now we also have the railway that is coming into the mid hills of West Bengal. So we have the railway that is coming in, which is again, you know, accelerating the impacts of disasters in the region. So although on one hand it brings in job opportunities, it also further leads to more vulnerability of communities and especially women. Because these employment is mostly given to men. Whenever there is a meeting, whenever there are policies, or whenever there is schemes that are distributed, or even relief that is distributed, it's the men who take it. And women are completely invisible in these discussions, in these meetings, and especially in these data and statistics. You know, we hear about community, riverine communities, fishing communities, farming communities, but the data on women and the perspectives on women is completely missing. And this is especially significant in mid hills, wherein women are you know, more visible in the public spaces. There are a lot of women in leadership positions, but you do not see it in you know, a lot of the reports that come out, and even a lot of discussions that come out. So of course, we know about the climatic impacts. We have large periods of droughts and followed by very heavy rainfalls that leads to flooding, landslides, accidents, deaths. And these again increase the vulnerability of women because like I said, the rescue mission that takes place, they're not women friendly, or they're not, there's no like gendered infrastructure or anything of that. So there are no women's groups or women relief group. So women not only become vulnerable to the disasters, but also to a lot of issues of harassment and so on and so forth. So
Ms. Chaya, I'm sorry, it's already
okay,
5 minutes.
okay.
I'm just going to cut you off. But very interesting. I see that a lot of sessions so far, we have been talking about the dams and other infrastructure on the river itself, but not much on the other side of construction. So that was a very insightful comment and remarks that you shared with us. Very interesting. It was very nice. I would like to now call Ms. Mailmit Lepcha. She is the General Secretary of Affected Citizens of Tista. So Ms. Mailmit, the floor is over to you. And she's representing the communities in Sikkim.
Okay. Hello, my friend, friend of Bangladesh. And I always feel happy, and I always wanted to talk to a friend from Bangladesh, especially the younger generation, because when we talk about the dams, it's like I always wanted to tell the Bangladesh people, the Bangladesh friend, that what is happening in upper region, So today I wanted to share one PP, but since I've given a very limited time, I just want to give you a very brief what is happening in Sikkim and in upper region of River Tista. So in the small state like Sikkim, we have more than 30 mega dams, and one of the highest mega dam is 1200 megawatts, and we have this more than 20 pharmaceutical companies, that has added more burden on River Tista. And all these pharmaceutical companies are built in the River Tista. And now recently what is happening is like we've been agitating, we've been fighting against the state government since a very, very long time, since like you saw that Minkit's this movie. She has made a fantastic movie, which she has, covered everything, since our struggle way back in 2007 to 2009, the hunger strike, we were arrested, we were taken to jail. Still, till today, we are still fighting. But recently, one of the biggest challenges that we are facing in Sikkim is like stage 4, that is 520 megawatts. If this stage 4 becomes a reality, we will not see any river Tista freely flowing in the entire Sikkim. That is the most will be most saddest part in the history of Sikkim. But we haven't lose of hope. We are still fighting in the grassroots level, and as an ACT general secretary, we are mobilizing the women. The women's self-help group has been a very, very strong backbone for this affected citizen of Tista. Plus, I'm a president of Sikkim Indigenous Lepcha Tribal Association. In this platform, we are trying to mobilize as much as women, the younger generation, and the impact of dam is like everywhere. The previous speakers have already said that there's a melting of glaciers. There are like indigenous livelihoods have been hit, and there's a rampant flash floods and landslides are there. But now, are we really serious about these issues? Are we just going to talk, or are we going to do something? I think I request my friend from Bangladesh, I think it's high time that let's work together, so put less pressure on in the Indian government. And even here, it's not that because of we are not highlighting because of social media and all, but in the grassroots level, we are fighting day and night to save our rivers, to save our identity, and to save our indigenous community. With this, I just want to end. Like, I think before our coming younger generation, before the coming generation, question us, I think we need to do something for them, because they will not, whatever is happening, it has been done by our previous generation, you know. But I think for the younger generation, I think our generation has a lot of responsibility to protect the river Tista and let the river Tista flow. I think they should not be like, I think we should not have more dam. I think people should not be so crazy about what is happening. I think Indian government is going crazy with this Himalayan belt. They are building back to back. They are building dams, which is going to be a disaster in near future. You know, with this, I would just want to end my short thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Malini. That was beautiful. And I saw a few reactions also from the participants. There were hearts with your message of we're getting united in the front and using the youth for our movement. Thank you so much. I think with that, we have the three representations of the grassroots reflections from Bangladesh, West Bengal, and Sikkim. Please, I'll hand over to Ms. Farah Kabir to continue.
Thank you,
the session.
Ruksha. Thank you, Ruksha. And I think the three speakers made a very, very logical and emotional and passionate call, and totally agree with I'll admit that, you know, the young have to come together and question those before them as well as their own selves and take on action from there. I will go back to our panelists. So Minket, Ajay and Nilormi, a 1-minute intervention, and then I will come to a member of parliament if he would like to say a few words. Minket?
Yeah, I just wanted to quickly talk. I'm really proud of the fact that all these three grassroots people got to speak, because they are the voices. But I think Dr. Ajay Dikshit, I've been a great fan of his writing and finally got to see him. He often mentions about river being a relation and not a resource. And I think this is something which is happening right now, where the upstream, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, so the upstream river communities are actually connecting with the downstream, and I feel a great privilege to screen this film to my fellow brothers and sisters in Bangladesh, because we are from the same river. So having said that, it is also to kind of, when we talk about rivers, especially when I was making the film, it was very important to understand that river does not have boundaries, and the river does not have some kind of a like a set pattern, you know, so we are always moving. So I also got an opportunity to connect with Bangladesh people, and Zareen is how I connected, and that's how we also got a workshop which we did recently, where the upstream and the downstream women communities actually got to interact with one another. But I think, having said that, first of all, the lens that we see, and not as an India or Bangladesh, but one river, is, I think, a lens that we need to look at, not as a filmmaker, but as a storyteller also. I've seen many folk narratives and folklore which connects these stories, which does not define boundary of India and Bangladesh, which defines people, relations, landscape, birds and butterflies and snakes and so on and so forth. So I think that's very important to look at the connection from the nature, and not, of course, the policy has a very important role, but I think how policy can also look into these aspects of not just human beings, but a fish like golden mahseer, which comes from the downstream in the upstream to lay eggs in the upstream Himalayan rivers, is a very important part. So this is what I want to say, and I hope we see each other as a one river and not like two countries. Thank you.
Wonderful. And I think that's why we are having the International Conference on River and Water, and this is the 7th one. Ajay?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah,
and while you speak and Ajay speaks, can you all put your cameras on? They'll take a photograph. Ajay, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Farah, for getting me in, and I'm really pleased to be connecting with some of the younger activists, scholars, and professionals. I've spent 40 years in this field, sort of as an engineer and trying to connect with society, nature, and then to kind of give voice to the voiceless, if you will, in my limited way. But I think the conversation has to go much more intensely, and as Minket says, water does not respect boundaries. The hydrological cycle, it's the large sort of, this amazing process of nature that connects us together. That's our life. That's our survival. So it's for the younger generation, I think, to sort of, be more articulate, substantive, and then to kind of, engage in the policy terrain. I just took up liberty of, sending you a link to a platform called South Asia Nadi Samvad that I've been trying to run for last 1 year, as I got stuck in the lockdown of the pandemic. Essentially, it tries to bring perspectives of water, various aspects. You can link it, and I really welcome, encourage, some of our younger friends to, do share your thoughts, because it is the conversation across boundaries, it is the conversation across discipline, it is the conversation across generation that's going to, get us into a path of sort of, taking better stewardship of South Asian water, because water in South Asia is in deep trouble. So that's what I want to emphasize. Once again, thank you very much, and thank you for all the earlier presenters for this wonderful opportunity. Thank you so much.
I will come to Choiti. Is there any question on the presentation from anyone? No? Okay. Choiti, having heard the discussion so far, listened to the discussions, do you have anything you would like to add?
No, it was a wonderful discussion. Mostly I like that everyone has the urge to mutually do something for the Tista River Basin. It is not a particular river, it links us over the boundaries. So I think the young generation actually we have the huge responsibility to think it as a basin and also do something better for the river itself, not only use for it for ourselves. So I think the message we're taking from this conversation is the responsibility of everyone, from the political, engineer, and the common mass people perspectives. We should do better for the Tista River Basin. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Choiti. Now, I will come to our Member of Parliament, but just to sum up, it was quite clear from the conversations and presentation and discussion that there is a gendered impact, and then the implications of Tista in its dry season, in rainy season, is not just a seasonal migration. And it's not just about women adapting and women being, being responsive, but are these choices for them? And there has been references to stress, mental health. There's been references to disruption, displacement. And there's also been a suggestion that we need to think about discriminatory, or shall we say positive planned investment in that area. And investment for research, investment for modeling, because we might be doing river modeling in other parts with other rivers, but maybe that doesn't apply for Tista. So as a Member of Parliament, what will be your takeaway listening to this session?
Well, thank you. Well, thank you very much. I was listening to everybody very carefully and minutely. As to Mr. Ajay Dixit, incidentally, I happen to be an engineer also, but not a civil engineer or a chemical engineer. But I have my friends in architecture and civil engineering department who are taking care of structures across the world and across the subcontinent in Bangladesh also. Your experience that the 30 years back, the engineers used to look in a way, now the whole concept has changed. And as you know, I'm an old man. I fought in the Liberation War of 1971. So I graduated in 1970. So you understand my knowledge of engineering and the old generation concept. By being in politics for the last almost 50 years, more than 50 years, I learned that is the people's opinion is the supreme opinion. But in the subcontinent, the governments are fighting with each other politically, and every time the people is the loser, and either this government wins or that government wins. So as I was listening to everybody, I see that when you're discussing rivers, especially Tista and other rivers in the subcontinent coming from the Himalayas, the rivers, the livelihoods, nature, all are intertwined. And in that case, any approach on the river, if it is not taking care of the livelihoods, nature, then it's a disaster for the river also, disaster for the livelihood also. And within the livelihoods, you have emphasized the woman element, gender element. Well, definitely, in any natural disaster, the worst sufferers are children and women. So when we plan to adapt and mitigate to disasters or floods, we need to take special care of how to take care of the children and women and the old people. So my takeaway is simple, that lastly I saw, yes, you will have to look through the lens of the holistic basin-wise planning. And if you do that, as you say, positive discriminatory intervention in the financial sector, yes, for that you need to look through the lens of equity. So look through the lens of holistic basin-wise planning and look through the lens of equity. Then you can find a solution which will be a win-win situation for the livelihoods, the woman, the nature, and the river itself. And people, another thing is that I was listening to everybody from Sikkim, Bhutan, West Bengal, India, and Bangladesh. So peoples along the river Tista had the same story of woes, sufferings, and anguish and concerns. So naturally, the peoples of along the Tista, be in Bangladesh or Sikkim or Bhutan or Nepal, need to collaborate. And for that, the parliamentarians, the politicians, and the government of the day need to listen to these people who are living alongside the river Tista with their anguish, concerns, and fears, so that the government of the day in Delhi and Bangladesh, Nepal, and Bhutan can adapt and mitigate to climate change and man-made structures. So I think let us follow a path where we take care of nature and livelihoods and the river itself. A three-pronged approach will save the situation. That is my takeaway. So I think that the second track dialogue need to be more active, more vocal. And in the morning session, yesterday I said that everybody talks of sharing water. So let us talking for holistic basin-wise planning, which takes care of climate change, takes care of livelihoods, takes care of women and children, takes care of agriculture, fisheries, etc. Thank you very much, Joy Bangla.
Thank you, Mr. Hawk. Now we are almost over time, so I want to wrap up, and I will not repeat what has been said. So what I take from here is that documentation is so important. The film by Minket is going to be there for all of us to refer to. So we need to do research, we need to document, and we need to capture the sentiments from the people living around Tista. For a long time, we have heard about policymakers, we have heard the engineer stories, the infrastructure story, development narrative. Now we need to also bring in the people's story, which is why ActionAid has been so involved in the whole process of trying to learn from the people, trying to learn from the river, and people of many rivers. For us, river is an entity. and river needs to be respected. And I will also take from Ajay and say river is a relationship. See, today we build relationships, we build networks. And so let us take this relationship and use this to protect the rivers. Now, this session was particularly looking at inclusion and gender dimension. In a society, in a world, in a country where there is existing discrimination, and there is so much tolerance towards such discrimination, we have an uphill battle, because any of the mindset not changing, policies being developed in the usual method and manner with the same lens and perspective will not address the gender dimension. So we need to go on together and highlight the impacts on with a gender lens. We need to bring in the grassroots lens, and we need to bring in the youth voices. I am so glad that today we were able to hear from our young friends, and I hope that you will become a movement, you will be a network, you will be a group of researchers and dreamers who will also influence us and hold us accountable. Thank you so much to the participants, to Zareen, to Minket, to Chaya, to Zareen again, and also Mailmit, and our distinguished discussants for being there. So have a great evening and see you tomorrow for the last thematic and closing sessions.
Okay, bye.
Over to you, Rupsa. Anything?
Bye.
No, thank you, Faraba. So just a reminder, tomorrow our closing session would be at 11 a.m. Dhaka time. So please use the Zoom links that is provided in your emails to join in. Thank you. So 11 a.m. tomorrow. Thank you, everyone.
Okay.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.